He switched his entire fleet to Massey Ferguson. Then his John Deere dealer cut him off. There are decisions you make on a farm that change the trajectory of everything. Not just the season, not just the year, the entire operation. For Randy Kohler, that decision happened on a Tuesday morning in April 2021 in a Massey Ferguson dealership 60 miles outside of Fremont, Nebraska. He didn't walk in there angry. He didn't walk in there bitter. He walked in there because the numbers finally made sense. Randy had been farming corn and soybeans on 2,400 acres in eastern Nebraska for 31 years. Third generation. His grandfather broke the ground. His father doubled the size. Randy held it together through droughts, floods, trade wars, and COVID market chaos. And for 23 of those 31 years, every single piece of major iron he owned came from the same place. Riverside John Deere, 15 minutes from his farm. 4 tractors, 2 S-Series combines, a self-propelled sprayer, a grain cart, all green, all bought, financed, and serviced through the same dealership. The same service manager, Greg Millard, had worked on Randy's equipment since 2004. The same parts guy, Dave, knew Randy's fleet by memory. When Randy walked in, they didn't ask what he needed. They already knew. That kind of relationship isn't just convenient. In agriculture, it's currency. But currency only matters if the price is right. And by spring 2021, the price wasn't right anymore. Randy had been watching the market shift for 2 years. John Deere's pricing wasn't just climbing, it was accelerating. A new 8R tractor that cost $310,000 in 2019 was pushing $370,000 by 2021. Combines were worse. The S780 he'd been eyeing was quoted at $542,000, and that was before adding the heads. Meanwhile, parts delays were getting longer. Service windows were tighter, and every time Randy asked about trade-in value on his aging equipment, the offers felt softer than they used to be. He wasn't imagining it. Deere's dealer network was stretched thin, prioritizing their highest volume customers, and Randy, solid, dependable, mid-sized Randy, wasn't at the top of that list anymore. So when a neighbor mentioned that Massey Ferguson had opened a new dealership in Columbus, Nebraska, Randy made the drive. He told himself he was just looking. He told himself he wasn't committed to anything. But the moment he walked onto that lot and saw the Massey Ferguson 8S.265 sitting under the morning sun, efficient power transmission, Dyna VT continuously variable drive, 265 horsepower on tap, something shifted. The sales rep, a younger guy named Travis, didn't oversell it. He didn't have to. "You're running how many acres?" "Around 2,400, Randy said. Travis nodded. "This'll handle it. And if you're looking to replace your whole fleet, we can work a package deal that'll save you about $140,000 compared to staying green." Randy blinked. "Say that again." Travis walked him through it. 4 Massey Ferguson tractors, 2 8S series for primary tillage and planting, 2 7700 series for lighter work, 2 ideal combines to replace his aging S-series machines. The sprayer could stay for now. They'd take his entire John Deere fleet on trade. The total package, financed over 6 years, $1.64 million. The equivalent Deere fleet, $1.78 million. Randy stood there in the lot, staring at the numbers on Travis's tablet, and felt something he hadn't felt in years when talking to a dealership. Wanted. He didn't sign that day. He went home. He ran the numbers with his wife, Linda. He called his accountant. He sat in his shop that night, looking at his John Deere 8370R, and thought about 23 years of loyalty. Then he thought about $140,000. 3 days later, he called Travis and told him to draw up the paperwork. The transition happened fast. By mid-May, Randy's entire fleet had turned red. The Massey Ferguson 8S265 and 8S205 handled the heavy pulling. The 2 7718s ran grain carts and did secondary tillage. The Ideal 9T combined sat in the machine shed, waiting for August. The equipment performed exactly as promised. The 8S265 had more low-end torque than his old 8370R. The cab was quieter. The CVT transmission was smoother in tight turns. Randy posted a photo on Facebook, his new 8S265 in the field, 6 rows of corn stubble turning under the Dyna 6 plow, and the comments rolled in. Most of them were positive. A few were skeptical. One guy wrote, "Hope you didn't burn any bridges, Randy." Randy didn't think much of it at the time. He should have. The first sign came in early June. Randy needed a replacement sensor for his old John Deere 1770 NT planter, one of the few green machines he'd kept because it still ran perfectly and didn't make sense to replace yet. He called Riverside John Deere. Dave, the parts guy, picked up. "Hey Dave, it's Randy. I need a speed sensor for the 1770. You got one in stock?" There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to feel different. "Let me check," Dave said. Another pause. "Yeah, we've got it, but it's going to be about 4 weeks." Randy frowned. 4 weeks? I thought you kept those sensors in stock." "We do," Dave said, "but we're back-ordered right now. I can put you on the list." "Can you overnight it from another dealer?" "Not unless it's an emergency." Randy felt his jaw tighten, winked thought. "Dave, I'm planting. It kind of is an emergency." "I understand," Dave said. His voice was polite, professional, and completely different than it had been 6 weeks ago. "But that's the best I can do right now." Randy hung up and ordered the part online. It arrived in 2 days from a distributor in Iowa. He told himself it was a fluke. The second sign came in July. Randy's grain cart, an older Deere 1112, developed a hydraulic leak. Not catastrophic, but enough that he wanted it looked at before harvest. He called Riverside and asked for a service appointment. Greg Millard, the service manager Randy had known for 17 years, answered. "Randy, what can I do for you?" "Got a hydraulic issue on the 1112. Can I bring it in next week?" Greg didn't answer right away. "We're pretty slammed right now," he said finally. "I can get you in, mid-August, maybe." "Mid-August?" Randy said. "Greg, that's harvest." "I know, but we're running a 6-week backlog on service." Randy had brought equipment into Riverside plenty of times over the years. He'd never waited more than a week. "Can you squeeze me in?" Randy asked. "I've been coming to you guys for over 20 years. There was a beat of silence. "I'll see what I can do," Greg said. "But I can't make any promises." Randy hung up and took the grain cart to an independent mechanic in Wahoo. The guy had it fixed in 2 days. That's when Randy started to understand what was happening. By late July, it was obvious. Randy tried to buy a used grain drill at Riverside's summer used equipment sale. He'd been to that sale every year since 2003. He usually got first look at the decent stuff before it hit the public lot. This year, he didn't get a call. He showed up anyway. The drill he wanted, a 1590 no-till drill in good shape, low acres, was listed at $32,000. Randy knew it was worth $28,000, maybe $30,000 tops. But he also knew Riverside usually worked with him on price. He found the sales manager, a guy named Tom Reichert, standing near the equipment line. "Tom," Randy said, extending his hand. Tom shook it, smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Randy, good to see you. That 1590 still available?" "It is. What's your bottom dollar on it?" Tom glanced at the drill, then back at Randy. 32. Randy waited for the counteroffer, the but-for-you discount, the long-time customer courtesy. It didn't come. "Tom, that's retail," Randy said carefully. "I've been buying from you guys for 2 decades. There's got to be some room there." Tom's expression didn't change. "Price is firm, Randy. If you want it, it's 32. If not, no worries." Randy stood there, the July heat pressing down on him, and felt the full weight of what he'd done. He'd switched brands, and Riverside John Deere was making sure he knew it. Randy didn't buy the drill. He went home, sat at his kitchen table, and told Linda what had just happened. "They're freezing me out," he said. Linda looked at him across the table. She'd been a farm wife long enough to understand what that meant. "Can they do that?" she asked. "They're not breaking any laws?" Randy said. "They're just not prioritizing me anymore." "Because you bought Massey Ferguson." "Yeah." Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you regret it?" Randy thought about the 8S265 sitting in his shed, the way it pulled, the fuel efficiency, the $140,000 he'd saved. "No," he said. "The equipment's great, but I didn't realize how much I was depending on that relationship." Harvest came in late August. The Ideal 9T combines ran beautifully. Randy cut 185 bushels per acre on corn, 58 on soybeans. The machines were fast, clean, and required almost no downtime. But 2 weeks into harvest, Randy hit a problem. One of his old John Deere grain carts, a 750 he'd kept as a backup, blew a planetary gear in the drive system. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of a long push to beat incoming rain. Randy called Riverside. Got the after-hours service line. This is Randy Kohler. I've got a planetary failure on a 750-grain cart. I need someone out here today if possible. The dispatcher was polite. We don't have anyone available for after-hours service calls right now. I can get you on the schedule for Monday. Monday's too late, Randy said. I'm in the middle of harvest. I understand, Mr. Kohler, but that's the earliest we can do. Randy hung up and called two other dealerships. One was 3 hours away. The other didn't service Deere carts. He ended up calling a retired mechanic from Fremont who charged him $850 in labor and drove out that evening. The guy had the cart running by midnight. Randy finished harvest. But the message was clear. Riverside John Deere wasn't coming to save him anymore. By October, the isolation was complete. Randy wasn't getting invited to Riverside's annual Customer Appreciation Dinner, something he'd attended every year since 1998. He wasn't getting early notifications about new inventory. He wasn't getting the courtesy calls from Greg or Dave. And the worst part? The rest of the farming community noticed. At the grain elevator one morning, another farmer, a guy named Carl Dietrich, who ran about 1,800 acres, pulled Randy aside. "Heard you're not tight with Riverside anymore," Carl said. Randy kept his expression neutral. "Where'd you hear that?" "Tom mentioned it," Carl said. "Said you went all in on Massey Ferguson." "I did." Carl nodded slowly. "How's that working out?" "Equipment's solid," Randy said. "But?" Randy met his eyes. "But I'm finding out that dealer relationships matter more than I thought." Carl didn't say anything for a moment. Then he clapped Randy on the shoulder. "Good luck with that, buddy." Randy watched him walk away and realized what had just happened. Carl was checking to see if Randy was still viable. Because in a small farm community, if your dealer cuts you off, people start wondering if you're overextended, if you made a bad decision, if you're struggling. Randy wasn't struggling, but the perception was forming anyway. Winter brought a different kind of problem. Randy had always relied on Riverside for equipment financing. They had relationships with John Deere Financial, and the terms were usually favorable. But now that Randy's fleet was Massey Ferguson, he was working with ATCO Finance. The terms were fine. The rate was competitive. But when Randy tried to trade in one of his older 7718 tractors to upgrade to a newer model, ATCO's trade-in appraisal came back lower than he expected. He called Travis at the Massey Ferguson dealership. "Why's the trade value so low?" Randy asked. "This tractor's only got 900 hours. "It's not the hours," Travis said. "It's the market. Used Massey Ferguson iron doesn't move as fast as Deere in this area, so the residual value's softer." Randy felt his stomach tighten. "You didn't mention that when I bought it." Travis hesitated. "Randy, you were trading in a full Deere fleet. The package deal made sense. But yeah, long-term, Massey Ferguson holds value differently depending on the region. In Nebraska, Deere's still king for resale." Randy hung up and stared at his shop wall. He'd saved $140,000 up front, but he'd locked himself into a brand that would cost him on the back end every time he tried to trade. Spring 2022 came hard. Fertilizer prices spiked. Diesel hit $5.40 a gallon. Corn futures softened. Randy's margins tightened. And when he needed a short-term operating loan to cover preseason input costs, his bank asked more questions than usual. "You've got a lot of new equipment debt," the loan officer said. "I consolidated my fleet," Randy said. "Saved money doing it." "But you switched brands," the officer said, "and you're not working with Riverside anymore." Randy felt his jaw tighten. "How do you know that?" "Small town, Randy. People talk." The loan went through, but the rate was higher than last year. Randy walked out of that bank and felt the full weight of what he'd done. He hadn't just switched equipment. He disrupted an entire ecosystem. By summer 2022, Randy had settled into a new reality. His Massey Ferguson equipment still ran great. The 8S.265 was a workhorse. The ideal combines were faster than his old S-Series machines, but he was operating alone. When his sprayer broke down in June, he couldn't call Riverside for a loaner. He had to rent one from a dealership 90 miles away. When he needed a specialty part for his planter, he couldn't walk into Riverside and have Dave pull it from the back. He had to order it online and wait. When he wanted advice on precision ag upgrades, he couldn't grab coffee with Greg and talk through options. He had to schedule a call with a Massey Ferguson rep he'd met twice. The equipment worked, but the support system was gone. And Randy started to realize something he'd never fully understood before. Farming isn't just about horsepower and hydraulics. It's about the invisible network that keeps you upright when things go wrong. The phone call from a parts guy who knows your voice. The service manager who moves you up the schedule because he remembers the year you helped him pull a header out of the mud. The sales manager who gives you first look at trade-ins because you've been loyal for 2 decades. Randy had valued that network, but he hadn't understood that it was conditional. One evening in late July, Randy sat in his shop, staring at the 8S Type 265. Linda came out and found him there. "You okay?" she asked. Randy didn't answer right away. "I keep thinking," he said finally, "about whether I made the right call." "The equipment's good," Linda said. "Yeah, the equipment's good. But," Randy looked at her, "but I didn't realize how much of farming isn't just about the iron. It's about the people who keep the iron running, and I burned that bridge." Linda sat down next to him. "Did you, or did they burn it?" Randy thought about that. "I don't know, maybe both. Would you do it differently?" Linda asked. Randy looked at the Massey Ferguson tractor. Then he looked back at his wife. "No," he said, "I'd do it the same, but I'd go in knowing what it costs." Harvest 2022 was clean. The ideal combines ran hard. Randy pulled 192 bushels per acre on corn. But in October, when Riverside John Deere sent out invitations to their annual customer appreciation dinner, Randy's name wasn't on the list. He didn't expect it to be, but it still stung. By fall 2022, Randy had rebuilt some of what he'd lost. He found an independent mechanic in Schuyler who specialized in Massey Ferguson equipment. The guy was good, fast, reliable, fair prices. He joined an online forum for Massey Ferguson operators and started swapping advice with farmers in Iowa, Kansas, and South Dakota. He developed a relationship with Travis at the Columbus dealership. It wasn't the same as what he'd had with Riverside, but it was functional. And slowly, Randy started to accept the new reality. He wasn't part of the Riverside network anymore. He was part of a smaller, quieter network, one that didn't have the same brand dominance or dealer muscle, but one that worked. In December 2022, Randy ran into Greg Millard at a farm equipment expo in Lincoln. They saw each other across the aisle. Greg nodded. Randy nodded back. For a moment, it looked like they might just keep walking. But Greg stopped. "Randy," he said, "Greg." They stood there, 2 men who'd worked together for 17 years, now on opposite sides of a brand divide. "How's the Massey Ferguson equipment treating you?" Greg asked. "Good," Randy said. "Real good, actually." Greg nodded. "That's good." There was a long pause. "I didn't want it to go this way," Randy said finally. Greg looked at him. "Neither did I, but you made a business decision, and we made ours." "Is that how it works now?" Randy asked. "I buy a different brand, and you cut me off." Greg's expression didn't change. "We didn't cut you off, Randy. We just stopped prioritizing you. There's a difference." "Doesn't feel like it." "Maybe not," Greg said, "but you've got to understand. Deere's our bread and butter. When you walked away from that, you walked away from the relationship that came with it." Randy didn't have an answer for that. Greg extended his hand. Randy shook it. "Take care, Randy," Greg said. "You too." Greg walked away. Randy stood there in the middle of the expo hall, surrounded by green iron and red iron and yellow iron, and realized something. He'd made the right call for his operation. But the cost wasn't just financial. It was relational. And in rural Nebraska, relationships are currency. Spring 2023. Randy Kohler still farms 2,400 acres outside of Fremont. His Massey Ferguson fleet still runs strong. The 8S 265 just rolled over 1,400 hours with 0 major issues. The ideal combines are booked for custom work this fall. He saved $140,000 on the initial purchase, but he lost something harder to quantify. The phone calls from Greg when a new piece of used equipment hit the lot, the off-the-record advice from Dave about which parts were worth upgrading, the invitations to the dealer dinners where he'd network with other farmers and hear what was working, the unspoken safety net of knowing that if something went catastrophically wrong, Riverside would find a way to help him. Randy doesn't regret switching to Massey Ferguson. The equipment proved itself. The 8S265 outperformed his old A370R in every measurable way. The fuel savings alone paid for half a season's diesel costs. The Ideal combines cut cleaner and faster than anything he'd run before. But he understands now that in agriculture, brand loyalty isn't just about the equipment. It's about the infrastructure that keeps you running when the equipment fails. It's about the mechanic who answers the phone at 9 p.m. on a Saturday. It's about the parts guy who knows your operation well enough to suggest a better solution before you even ask. It's about the dealer who will float you a loaner machine in the middle of harvest because he knows you're good for it. Randy built a new version of that infrastructure. It's smaller, it's less convenient, but it works. And when you leave the old infrastructure, you'd better be ready to build a new one from scratch, because the old one won't take you back. Not in this business, not in this town, not ever.